right, welcome everyone. This is going to be part two of a very, very exciting series. Not sure exactly how many episodes we're going to have over here. I realize there's a lot to unpack and a lot to share. I'm really excited about this. This is called Moshiach Update 2026, 5786. And as we mentioned yesterday, 2026 got off to a explosive start in terms of Moshiach's powerful effects on the world. At the beginning of 2006, we were watching the collapse of the evil empire. And yesterday's class that I gave was called, the fall of or the collapse of evil, or the fall of evil. This class is named Washington versus Napoleon, Moshiach's choice. And the truth is that these subjects that we're talking, that I'm titling these classes to fit parts of what we will be talking about and what we will be covering. As I mentioned yesterday, yesterday's class was, everybody please listen to before you listen to this class, is laying out the kind of the outside sketch of what we'd like to be talking about in this entire Moshiach mosaic, if we would call it, a tapestry of like bringing together the last 2.5 centuries and seeing it all from with a central theme of the powerful Moshiach forces, the powerful messianic energies, including Moshiach himself, directing world events to the, obviously God directing world events, but Moshiach's role in facilitating all of that, for the grand finale of, which is really not the finale, it's actually the beginning of real life that's going to happen momentarily with the culmination and the complete coming of Moshiach with the building of the third temple and so on and so forth. So there is a lot of information. And what we did yesterday was I laid out, and I thought I would get through everything yesterday, but in my head and in mind, it's much faster to think than it is to talk. So we got through part of it, and I guess this part two that we're going to do today is going to be continuing the outer sketch of what we're going to be talking about, and then we're going to fill in the soul of everything and the deeper meaning of it all. Be'ezrat Hashem, maybe I think in today's class we'll just get started with that, and then this will follow up probably with another 3 classes, and I think with another 3 classes we should have this all wrapped up. Okay, I'm purposely dividing this into about 4 to 5 classes, just that it's not too much to take in, and that the classes are set for not to exceed an hour. I don't do this usually, set my alarm to not go over time. So we're going to keep these to an hour, but I think these are really, really worth listening to. They're meaningful. Whether you'll agree with me or not, that's obviously, you'll see if it resonates in your soul and how this speaks to you. There's a lot of information. And here we go. I'm just going to do a brief points that we discussed yesterday. Yesterday we began with the event that happened just the other day with the fall of Maduro, or the capture of Maduro. What's his name? Nicolas Maduro. How that is not to be seen just as an individual event, but that is part of a general cosmic collapse of evil, in which we're watching a tyrant after tyrant, corruptive government after corruptive government collapsing and falling. And this is all part of Moshiach unfolding in the world, as Moshiach organically kind of emerges as the ultimate goodness and light and godliness that is embedded in humanity and embedded in the world, surfaces. Evil has no place, and evil just disappears in a puff of smoke. It's important to understand that. These are not interventions, even though it was through the United States intervening in Venezuela, but inherently they're not external interventions. There are the world from within its purity, from within its soul, is spitting out the garbage, is vomiting, if you might say. Sometimes it's ugly, is vomiting its its germs, its toxics, or its toxins, or whatever it is that's not good inside of it, and the world is rejecting it. It's falling. And at any moment, we're going to watch the Iranian regime also collapse and disappear in thin air. And once that's out, you really have evil broken everywhere. Now, we would love, and what we're going to plan on doing, and we might just touch upon it today, why right now? Why are we watching this now? Is there something about the time that we're in right now in which it had to happen now? Was this predictable a year ago that it would happen now? So if you listen to my classes from a year ago, you heard that we were talking about the prediction, the prophetic predictions of the Zohar that had to do with last year, in which was like the onset of the fall of major, powerful dark forces. We discussed how that related to the fall of Assad in Syria, Hezbollah collapsing, Hamas being almost obliterated. The job is not finished, and we can't relax until it's completely vanquished. The snake is completely dead. We can't relax until that. But now with the imminent collapse of the Ayatollahs in Iran, Maduro, who is a huge financer and a huge piece of the puzzle in supporting all this terrorism being taken out, this is actually spectacular. And the timing is, on God's time, like impeccable. And we're going to speak about that soon as we're going to get to that. What we also discussed yesterday, important, was we spoke about this year being the year 2026. We mentioned the numeric significance of that in terms of God's name, which I don't want to repeat what we learned yesterday. We discussed that it's also the Hebrew year 86, which 86 in Hebrew gematria, 86 also is another name of God. We spoke about the superiority of God's name that is associated with the secular year this year, strangely, versus the name of God, which is generally considered a more limited name of God, the name of Elohim, which is the name associated with the Hebrew year. And we discussed that seemingly upside down dynamic and what the significance of that can mean. Again, we didn't explain this yet. We just touched upon it and brought it to your attention. Finally, we discussed the significance of 2026 as the anniversary or the birthday of the United States of America, where the USA reaches a huge, significant milestone of a quarter of a millennium, which makes the United States a powerful, lasting empire. In other words, it reaches the time where you can really say it really etched itself in time in a serious way. 250 years is serious time. But what we discussed yesterday was, and we mentioned that the United States of America is a fundamental stepping stone of humanity, of the human condition being rectified in order as a prerequisite for the coming of Moshiach. And not just a prerequisite, but kind of as part of the messianic refinement and elevation of the world. It has a lot to do with the United States of America and as we're still going to see. Now, what we did discuss yesterday is that there is an amazing parallel to the United States of America with the Jewish evolution of Moshiach in the Jewish world during these 250 years, to the point that the same year that the United States was established, in 1776, at the exact same year, the Alter Rebbe, founder of Chabad, established the first Chabad center. Now, that is not a coincidence. And we're going to prove when we're going to unpack this all, not in today's class, what the relationship is and where we see the parallels. I just discussed a lot yesterday that there are parallels on many points. The first Chabad Rebbe, the previous Lubavitch Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, and finally the Lubavitch Rebbe himself, connects himself very strongly with the United States of America. We are going to follow that pattern and see what's the significance and how this works. Now, what we mentioned yesterday, and here's where we kind of are going to pick up today's class. What we mentioned yesterday is that this quarter of a millennium, this time, this particular time of these 250 years correspond to, at the very same time, there was also a major battle between Moshiach's forces in this world, or the way I like to call it, the restored throne of the house of David, the Kisei, not just the Kisei, but the Malchus Beis David, the royal family of the kingdom of David HaMelech, as it is making its way back through the manifestation of 7 tzaddikim leading up to Mashiach, beginning with Rav Shneur Zalman of Eliadi, who is a direct descendant of King David, who has been identified through his descendants, including the 5th Chabad Rebbe, Reb Shalom Dov Ber, who mentions specifically regarding his dynasty, where he is the 5th one in that dynasty. He mentions that he proclaims very strongly in one of his talks, we are of the family of David. And upon us it says, these are the words that Rebbe Rashab, I'm not exactly quoting the word, but something to this effect, it is upon our family that it is said upon us, that his flame, which is the flame of King David, will never be extinguished. We know that God makes a promise to King David, which is God's choice, through which God manifests his kingship in this world, that although your kingdom is going to be disrupted, it's only going to be a temporary disruption, and it's going to return like the moon, even though it disappears from the sky. The Malchus Beis David in Judaism, there's a lot of connection, and it's mentioned in Psalms based on a verse in Psalms, Ki Yareach Yikaim, something like that, the Yikaim Yolam, like the moon that stands forever. Although the moon goes dark in the sky, the moon always returns, and this is a prophetic promise, and a promise that God makes to King David, that his descendants will return to his throne and usher in the ultimate rectification of the world. Now, where we will take this is that this starts with the onset of the Hasidic movement from the Baal Shem Tov, but really takes on a very, very serious stance in the world with Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi, founder of Chabad Hasidism. This continues through 7 generations, all the way up to the Lubavitcher. Now, what are the jobs of the Davidic kingdom? In addition, that their job is, as we mentioned yesterday, is to bring about a world rectification, l'sakein olam, to fix the world, which therefore, as I will make the argument, it's their spiritual support that lent the hand and directed the energy for the United States of America. And as we will still talk about the parallel between the two, at the same time, they must wage the war against the powerful dark forces of evil that are fighting for their life to stop the Moshiach's arrival, because when Moshiach will come, they will disappear forever and ever, like a puff of smoke without any trace whatsoever. So they fight for their life. But when they fight, they must present an alternative to Mashiach, which means what they try to do really is, this is really interesting, is that they ride the wave of Mashiach's wave, Mashiach's vibrations. But what they do is they try to usurp those powerful messianic energies, cosmic energies, godly and most potent godly energies, and try to pervert it in a non-godly way. And this is part of what the spiritual battle is all about between Mashiach's representatives in this world that need to wage war against these dark forces. And we're going to see that. So it's important to understand to make that from there is an idea which we're not going to dwell on it too much. We're just going to I'm making note of it very briefly now. There is a powerful idea going back to ancient Jewish mysticism and discussed even in the more less mystical books, but even in the more prominent commentaries of Torah like Ramban, Rabbeinu Bachaya, Nachmanides, Rabbeinu Bachaya, these are powerful, fundamental commentators on the Torah. In Bereshis, in Parshas Bereshis, which is the beginning of Genesis, by the story of creation, they speak about, just like there is the 6 days of creation, they also speak about cosmic time, which means that in the 6 days of creation, it's a micro of the macro of all of history. So they speak about the 6 days of creation corresponding to 6,000 years. And the creation of Adam, which happens on Friday is when the human is introduced, means the world does not reach its maturity and its ultimate human contribution until we are in the 6th millennium, which is currently now, which is between the year 5,000 and the year 6,000. And that's the era of Moshiach. Moshiach needs to come according to this system and according to the Zohar, and there's tons and other sources to this idea, that Moshiach's arrival happens sometime between the year 5,000 and the year 6,000. Primarily the most conducive and most apropos time for Moshiach's arrival is in the latter half of the 6th millennium, which means from the year 5,500 to the year 6,000. Which corresponds to Friday, but Friday daytime. You see, you have 500 years, which is from the year 5,000 to the year 5,500, which in the secular calendar would be from the year 1240 to the year 1740. That's the first 500 years of the 6th millennium. That's the nighttime. And not necessarily, when it's nighttime, because in the Jewish calendar, night goes before day, like in the Torah. God said, let there be night, and then morning. First, Erev or night, then day. So Mashiach's arrival then is the second half, which is the 500 years that follows that. That means from Friday morning, which begins in the year 1740. So it's amazing that this entire Hasidic movement, including the Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi, which I will kind of try to share a little bit, not a lot, of why this is the foundation of the restoration of the Davidic dynasty, returning the kingdom of Mashiach to the world through, in other words, there is already an element of kingship there, but a kingship that's not, obviously not a full-fledged king like we know, fully majesty of the king, but there is already the energies of kingship, and there are the ideologies of Mashiach, powerful revolutionaries ideas that are going to transform the world inside out and upside down through the philosophies of Chabad Hasidism, which is going to steer the Jewish people, and not just the Jewish people, but all of humanity, as we see that one of the most powerful influences in the world is, are obviously the Jewish people. Within the Jewish people is Hasidism, and within Hasidism is Chabad Hasidism. So the timing is really interesting because the Baal Shem Tov, comes before the Alter Rebbe. Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi is the 3rd generation of Hasidism, but he innovates his own brand of Hasidism, one that is called Chabad. Chabad means the intelligent, the intellectual side of the Hasidic movement. The Alter Rebbe is the 3rd generation of the Baal Shem Tov. Now, the Baal Shem Tov is the one who brings the light of Hasidism, which the light of Hasidism is the powerful, godly energy of Mashiach to the world. So therefore, what I'm going to make an interesting suggestion. It's not me making the suggestion. These ideas that are discussed before me, I'm just bringing it to the forefront. That from 1740, the windows, the cosmic windows opened up, and the powerful, we might call it, Ruchai Shel Mashiach, the spirit of Mashiach begins to descend into the world. We might refer to it as powerful vibrations of Mashiach in the cosmos. So it shouldn't be, and that's what creates these powerful movements within the Jewish people that uplift the Jewish people and bring out a much deeper type of a service to God and a much higher knowledge, which is what Hasidism brought to the world. And create massive changes in the way Jews connect to God and the way Jews connect to each other and the way Jews are impacting the world. But at the same time, that these energies are entering into the universe, we will see that the world is also going into the modern world. And what's happening is powerful shifts are changing in humanity in general. And there are those who will try to tap these energies, I don't know if consciously or subconsciously, but maybe even consciously, and ride the wave of Moshiach, but in a corrupted manner. This is like kind of the dark side trying to usurp this Moshiach energy to thwart, to create an alternative Moshiach, which is a substitution to the real Moshiach. We will see that that will manifest, and this is where I'm going to cover in these classes, is that it's the first one to really ride that Moshiach wave was Napoleon, and Napoleon's desire to be king over the world had a messianic ring to it, and I'm not going to go into it right now. But what are interesting is that Napoleon ends up being the ultimate antithesis to Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi, and eventually they go head to head. They fight it out, and it ends up being bloody for both of them. I'm saying something very sharp. Bloody for both of them is because the Alter Rebbe Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi gives a death blow to Napoleon. He doesn't physically kill him, but he caused Napoleon to have his great defeat in 1812 when I think it was Tsar Nicholas, in his war against, or maybe Tsar Alexander, I think it was, who defeated Napoleon in 1812. Since then, and then when Napoleon had this incredible loss, he went out this took him down, and that's it, was done. So his dreams of world dominance kind of was over. On Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi's side, we're going to see that Reb Shneur Zalman literally fought Napoleon spiritually, but even physically. He had his followers embedded in the French armies to spy and to help the Tsar. Yes, it was Tsar Alexander. So in this battle that was between Napoleon, fought by the Russian government, and the Alter Rebbe is then living in Russia, supporting Russia in this war. But most important is that the Reb Shneur Zalman of Liadi gave his life, sacrificed his life to win this battle, because the Alter Rebbe passed away untimely, before his time, because he chose to fight this battle. Because he chose to go into this battle, he had to escape into the freezing winter, that same winter which was probably that was the same winter that devastated Napoleon's armies in Russia. That very same winter brought the Alter Rebbe, I think, a pneumonia, and he got very ill, and he passed away, and we're going to commemorate his yahrzeit next week. So the Alter Rebbe literally gave his life for this battle, but he won the war. He defeated Napoleon. He won the battle, but he didn't win the war, because this battle is going to rage for the entire 7 generations of the Messianic, of Moshiach's presence in this world, of Moshiach unfolding in this world. The last period of time leading up to Moshiach, this battle is going to be a powerful cosmic battle. And we will see that after Napoleon, the next one who takes up and tries to present a Messianic alternative, but it's the spiritual ears of Napoleon, is Karl Marx and the communist movement. And then culminating in the USSR, the Soviet Union, and they bring the war against Mashiach to the doorsteps of Mashiach himself, which means they bring it to the doorsteps of the 6th Chabad Rebbe. In other words, they go neck to neck or head to head in a battle. They arrested the previous Chabad Rebbe, they threw him into prison, and they almost had him die. They almost killed him. They already sentenced him to death. With divine intervention, literally miracles from the miracles, the previous Rebbe is released in 1927 after being incarcerated in a Russian notorious, monstrous prison. They're forced to liberate him and to free him, and obviously it's not with their will. He triumphs over them. He leaves his Hasidim behind, his followers behind in Russia. He has to leave Russia. His Hasidim are behind, but they're deeply attached to him. They continue the underground battle to preserve Judaism in the face of communist oppression and the communists' desire to snuff out the belief in God, which is all a continuation of this dark battle to fight against Moshiach, to erase God from the world. This godless force. And the previous Rebbe wins that battle. But you see, again, this is a second bout that takes place between the Chabad dynasty and this anti-Mashiach satanic force. And then it culminates, and this is where we're going to go with the seventh Chabad Rebbe, Rav Shneur Zalman of Liadi, and the war then translates to the United States of America. Where the Rebbe, by the way, continues fighting the Soviet regime, which is the Iron Curtain, which is literally clamping shut millions of Jews and trying to snuff out and disconnect them from their spiritual roots. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe, is their support system through underground, you can write books and books on how the Rebbe fought this war, both spiritually in the upper realms and physically down here below. But you saw something really interesting, which I'm going to point out now, is that the Rebbe, and we're going to go through this, directly is instrumental in taking down some of the premiers of Russia, including Stalin. Stalin dies suddenly. As we know, Stalin's death is one of the great things that are discussed. How did Stalin die? It was a sudden thing. The Lubavitcher Rebbe had a direct involvement in that, as we will discuss the story briefly. Then in 1958, something like that. And then in the 1980s, the Rebbe is directly involved, as we will see, spiritually, in an elimination of another two of the Russian premiers, or three. The last three Russian leaders, Brezhnev, who are their names? Brezhnev, Andropov, and Chernenko, which died suddenly, quickly, successively, one after another. We're going to see that this is associated with the Rebbe's involvement. And it sounds like conspiracy theories, but these are things that are well documented. They're very interesting. Again, you'll judge on your own after I'll present this. But again, I'm not presenting it now. I'm just laying out the outline. And this happened in the 1980s and till 1985. In 1985, when Chernenko died in March of 1985, Gorbachev was then instated as the premier in Russia. And then it seems like the Rebbe relaxes. And the Rebbe kind of says, okay, Gorbachev is okay. So much so that, as we will still discuss, and I mentioned in other classes, if you listen to my classes in the past, the Rebbe immediately sends a message to the Jews in Russia that they're okay and the doors of Russia will soon open up. When Gorbachev himself admitted years later that he had no idea that he would do it. How much so are you seeing the Rebbe, the forces of holiness, the messianic forces of holiness in this world, conducting this powerful spiritual battle? But we all know where it all ended, that in 1990 or 1989, 1990 and 1991, the USSR completely dissolves. And we're going to see how that as well is directly influenced by the Lubavitcher. So that's kind of the total victory in this battle. But again, it's not the complete victory, because that same force to try to bring us a messianic world, but devoid of God and devoid of godliness, seeps into the United States of America as well. And we get a war on the soul of America, which is still raging to this very moment, which is again this cosmic battle to derail or to disconnect America from what America really is, which is really interesting. So that kind of continues. But one of the very, very, very important dates that we're going to talk about is that in 1985, as the Rebbe, spiritually cuts off the source of these three last Russian leaders, it's exactly at that time that a personal affront and a war suddenly breaks out against the Rebbe in 1985. And that's going to be the story that we will discuss, called the story of Hey Teves. Hey Teves is a story of where there was the Lubavitcher Rebbe's ownership, or the Chabad world was challenged by a relative of the Chabad family, who challenged the Chabad, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and challenged the entire Chabad movement in claiming that a major inheritance of a library that belonged to the previous Chabad Rebbe was private property, and therefore should be given partially to a grandson of the Rebbe for his private use, that he has the rights to sell the books and so on and so forth. Now, what's really interesting is that this went to the United States, to federal court, and it was fought out in court over a period of about the whole thing began in 1985, and the court case was completed with the victory of Chabad in 1987. What's really, really interesting is that the Lubavitcher Rebbe turned this into spoke of this as a cosmic battle of like darkness versus light. The Rebbe very, very much saw this as a personal war against him. And the Rebbe saw it as a contesting the Rebbe himself being the heir to Chabad, being the successor to his father. In other words, this was an attempt to delegitimize the Lubavitcher Rebbe himself, the seventh Rebbe. So we will put this into the context of this war. The reason it happened in 1985 is very, very, very much in line with this clash, this powerful fight. And when the Rebbe deals a devastating blow to communism and kind of knocks the nail into the coffin, takes down those last leaders, until he has his man in there that's going to completely dismantle the USSR. Again, this is not just affecting the Jewish people. You have to realize this is affecting millions and millions of people on the planet. This is really which ended the Cold War. This is like a huge event in history. This is going to be contested by pushback. And the pushback happens in this war, which results in a holiday called Hey Teves. So what we're going to talk about is what's the significance of this entire battle that was fought against. In these 250 years, there is a support system for the United States of America to establish America and to establish the ideology of the United States, but at the same time to fight the Napoleon's Moshiach's ideas and his spiritual successors, not necessarily directly linked up with Napoleon. I mean, I was looking online if there's a relationship between Karl Marx and Napoleon, and there is quite a bit of but I'm not coming from that. I'm not an expert on that. I'm talking about the idea of a certain denial of God, a certain heresy, and presenting a Moshiach alternative, which is where we connect Napoleon to the Soviet Union, which continues down to a certain war that's still being waged right now between certain forces in the United States of America. So all of this is going to be discussed in a phenomenal discussion, okay? Which leads us to the next point of all of this. And that is, we're going to have a fascinating discussion about the month of Teves, because we're now in the month of Teves. Now, the month of Teves, which is generally the Hebrew month, it's the 10th month in the Hebrew calendar when we begin counting from the month of Nisan, which is in April. The Hebrew calendar is a very confusing calendar because the first month is not the beginning of the year. First month is actually midway through the year. And the year, when we counted, we changed the year like to be from 57, like now it's 5786. That just started in September time, which on the Hebrew calendar is the 7th month. So it's just confusing, but the month of Tevet is the 10th month, and it always corresponds with December, January. Okay, so it represents mid-winter. Okay, freezing, frigid winter. Okay, so we're gonna have this. I think just really deep understanding of the significance of the month of Teves, the dates associated with the months of Teves, and why the month of Teves is so dynamically Geula and Moshiach. I'm actually going to introduce a new theme that I think no one ever spoke about. And that's probably going to be the name of one of the classes that we're going to learn. It's called the Winter Mashiach of Chabad. Okay? What it's basically going to explore is the concept of what the winter months represent and why the dynamic of that there is two possibilities for Mashiach to emerge to the world. One of them is a summer Mashiach, and the other one is a winter Mashiach. And the Mashiach that we are watching unfolding in the world, which happens to be the Mashiach as it is seen from the Chabad perspective, with the great deep insights of Hasidism, is a winter Mashiach. And the difference of it is going to be, and again, I'm just throwing out little pointers of where this is going to go. It's whether Mashiach is a phenomenon that is a holiness and a godliness that is superimposed upon the world from above, and that's a summer Mashiach, or whether Mashiach grows out from the world itself, whether Mashiach comes from the highest, holiest places of the world, or whether Mashiach comes from the bottom and the lowest places of the world. Is Mashiach rising from earth, or is Mashiach descending from heaven? And this is going to decide the two seasons of the year: summer, which is a time of divine revelation, and winter, which is a time of darkness, coldness, and the absence of light and darkness. And yet precisely in the darkness, from the darkness, sprouts forth Mashiach. And according to this, Mashiach will not come from Israel. Mashiach will actually come from America. It will come from the bottom of the world. It will come from the lower hemisphere, as we will all discuss. These are phenomenal ideas. And I know I sound like a total lunatic a little bit in what I'm saying right now, but you have to give me the benefit of the doubt. Stick with me through the series, because whatever I'm saying is seriously is going to make so much sense and is going to be so incredible. Based on that, I would like to explore something really phenomenal. Mainly, we're going to have this deep exploration on the month of Teves. And we're going to talk about we're going to talk about the main events of the month of Teves, which are 4 primary events in the context of Mashiach's coming. And it's interesting that January 1st, the new year on the secular calendar, usually is in the month of Teves. It can also be in January, but usually it's in the month of Teves. So the significance of the month of Teves, together with its iconic dates, significant dates, but what we're also going to talk about is to develop the theme of the winter months in general, Kislev, which is the month before that, which usually is November, December, which is when Hanukkah comes out. But what's very important is it is the most important Hasidic month, is the month of Teves. It's when Hasidism flows into the world. So we're going to discuss how Kislev, and I'm giving just a little outline. We're going to speak about how Kislev brings the Torah of Mashiach to the world. It brings Hasidism, which is, again, turns Judaism on its head, because it's the inner essence of Judaism revealed. It reveals itself in the 3rd months of the winter, which is the polar opposite of the third month of the summer, which is the month when traditional Torah is given to the world. That means when the Torah is given to the world at Sinai, that's the extrateric element of the Torah. That part of that giving of the Torah as it's coming from heaven, Torah as it relates to the summertime, Torah as it's an illumination from above, happens in the third month of the summer, but Torah as it is related to Moshiach comes in the frigid cold, in the long nights, short days, frigid cold days of Hanukkah time, winter time. That's when Hasidism bursts out into the world. The month of Teves is going to be the month of implementation of Hasidism in this world. The main work of what Hasidus brings to the world, a shift in our entire perspective of how we deal with this world, is all related to the month of Teves and to the powerful dates of the month of Teves that we're soon going to discuss. Finally, this is going to lead us into the month of Shvat, which is January, February, which is going to land us to Mashiach himself, the Goel, the Redeemer himself, which is going to all evolve around the day of the 10th day of the month of Shvat, which is the day of the passing of the previous Chabad Rebbe and the beginning of the leadership of the 7th Lubavitcher Rebbe on the 10th and 11th day of the 11th month of the 11th year of the month of Shvat. And that's again, so we go from the ideology of Mashiach, we go to the work, the effects of the ideology of the Torah of Mashiach on the world, which sets the stage for the Redeemer himself to appear, which is in the month of Shvat, which leads us into the month of Adar, which is the month of Purim, when redemption actually starts happening. So you're going to follow this. It's going to be like absolutely stunning. And it's all going to follow the theme of a Mashiach that's coming from below and not a Mashiach coming from above. Which, by the way, is going to have tremendous repercussions on the way the Jewish people ought to prepare right now for the coming of Mashiach. I'm just going to throw a little nugget, which I will hope to address right now. Again, these are all just an outline of where we're going with this, is that we are going to discuss the question that people are having today, whether in the face of so much anti-Semitism around the world, including what happened in the massacre in Bondi, and then Mamdani becoming mayor of New York and revoking the anti-Semitic protections on the first day of his office. Pretty scary. Including the voices of on the far right that have suddenly appeared out of nowhere, that have become so prevalent and so loud spoken. I'm talking about Carlson and Candace Owens and Fuentes and all these voices that are so anti-Semitic and have become so loud, which is intimidating the Jewish. And this is in addition to the far left and their anti-Israel movement. So a lot of people are of the opinion, and rabbis and good-minded people are calling Jews to make aliyah. That the time has come for the Jewish people to come to Israel because Israel is the safest place, and everybody come to Israel. Now that's a question. Should we do that, or should Jews just stay anchored where we are, continuing to shine light in the lands of the nations? So where should we go? It will depend a lot of where Mashiach is coming from. If Mashiach is coming from Israel or Mashiach is coming from down and under. But it's not just a question technically where Mashiach is coming from. The question is fundamentally, do we have a summer Mashiach or do we have a winter Mashiach? And therefore, is Mashiach going to come by us escaping to our fortress in Israel and God is going to send us the redemption from above? Or is Mashiach coming from below? Is it coming through a elevation of earth? I will quote one verse where it says clearly that in this redemption, God, I have to look up where the verse is. I don't have it right now in my head because we're going to discuss this more at great length in the further classes. So I'll save it for then. But there is a verse that says, you're not going to escape. When you went out of Egypt, It says, Ki barach the people escaped. We escaped Egypt. We ran. We tricked Pharaoh. We said we're going out for 3 days, and then we ran, and we didn't come back. So there was an element of escaping. In this redemption, it says, you're not going to run, and you're not going to escape. Now, I'm not against people making aliyah to the land of Israel. That's a very good thing. If you want to go to Israel because you want to go to Israel because you cherish the land of Israel and you feel like it's the best place for you to serve God, albeit it's a mitzvah to go to the land of Israel. There's no question regarding that. My question is if Jews should be intimidated by anti-Semitism. Again, I'm not coming to give you advice as, speak to your rabbi, whoever you ask your halachic questions, and discuss it. Speak to her. I'm just coming from a pure ideological place, based on the fundamental understanding of how Moshiach comes to the world. What will come out of all these classes is absolutely no escaping and running to Israel, because our job is to bring and lift the world up from the bottom up with the world. The world will celebrate our return to Israel. The world will raise the Jewish people up on their shoulders and carry us to Israel when it's time to go. There is no reason for this running and this haste and this escaping, but it's all following this deep understanding of a winter Mashiach, not a summer Mashiach. Okay. Now I want to go through for a moment what are the dates of the month of Tevis that we would like to hit upon and discuss in the consequential class. So the first date of the month of Tevis that we're going to talk about is the beginning of Tevis, which is the first significant day in the month of Tevis, which happens in the year 3,336 to creation. So this is way back ago, 2,614 years ago, when Nebuchadnezzar's armies lay siege on the city of Jerusalem. In other words, the Jewish people, after they have become a people for the first time, are under siege for the first time. This day is the most serious day on the Jewish calendar in a certain way. It's the darkest day on the Jewish calendar because it's the beginning of all darkness, of all exiles. Of course, there was the days that we were in Egypt, but that's before we became a people. Once the Jewish people were established already as God's people in this world, living in Jerusalem as a monarchy, with their king, and so on and so forth, the beginning of the destruction of the first temple, which, by the way, was never replaced with the second temple, because the second temple was a bare shadow of the first temple. It will only be replaced by the third temple. So really, the onset of all exile begins on the 10th day of the month of Tevis. I would like you to mark something down in your head, which is very significant to our discussion. And that is that the beginning of the exile happens on the 10th day of the 10th month, which should be the holiest possible day, because in Judaism, 10 is a very holy number. It says specifically in Leviticus, all the way in the end of Leviticus, Asiri Kodesh, the 10 is holy. 10 represents a certain perfection. We know God created the world in 10 utterances, there are 10 commandments, there are 10 sephirot in Kabbalah. Everything is associated with number 10. 10 is the epitome of holiness. So the 10th day of the 10th month, imagine, the 10th day of the 7th month, 7 is also a special number, is Yom Kippur, the holiest day. Can you imagine the 10th day of the 10th month should have been like holy, like there's never been a holy day like that. And yet, it's the onset of an exile. It takes 3 years until Nebuchadnezzar goes in and destroys the temple, which consequently brings us the 9th of Av and the 17th of Tammuz. But it all begins with Asara B'Tevis, which is a very severe fast day. So much so that if it would come out on Shabbos, there is a belief, or there is an opinion that says that if it would come out on Shabbos, even on Saturday, we would fast, which we never do besides Yom Kippur. So it's a very, very serious doctrine. So with that day, we're going to discuss. Now, what I want you to, I'm making mark of, just to keep you on your toes, is that the beginning of exile happens on the 10th day of the 10th month. But the rectification of exile happens on the 11th day of the 11th month. The reason exile even happens is because we are stuck in the paradigm of number 10. When you're stuck in the paradigm of number 10, although you reach the pinnacles of holiness, it results, God is very not satisfied. You know why? Because 10 10 represents godliness coming from above. A summer perfection is the perfection of number 10. God gives us 10 commandments. God creates the world through 10 utterances. God, as God descends into this world, is through the number 10. But here very deeply. In order to elevate and to rectify earth and to transform earth, number 10 doesn't work. Number 10 can purify and elevate only the higher part of earth, not the lower part. To purify and to rectify the lowest parts, we need to dig much deeper into God and unplug number 11. And that's going to be the significance of the month of Shvat, which is the 11th month. And the 11th day of the month of Shvat, the day that the Lubavitcher Rebbe becomes a Rebbe, the 11th day of the 11th month, which is unplugging the godliness that's coming from below, which is infinite godliness, which is the secret for the elevation of America, and through America, the entire world. Do you realize where this is all going? There's some spectacular ideas over here. So again, remember, we're going to talk about the month of Teves, the destruction of the temple on the 10th day of the month of Teves, and that is going to be followed with the next event of the month of Teves. Again, listen, what I'm giving you is just a little teaser of what is going to be discussed in the next classes. So the next big event of the month of Teves, again, I find significance. There might be other days, but these are the days that I find meaningful to myself, and the Rebbe spoke about it, is a day coming up in 3 days from now, which is the 20th day of the month of Teves, which is the day of the passing of one of the greatest Jewish leaders of all time, Maimonides, Rav Moshe ben Maimon. Now, he passed away in the year 1204 on the secular calendar, 1204, which is the year 4,964 since creation, way after the story of the previous event of Teves, basically 822 years. Now, the day of a passing of a tzaddik is considered a very potent day. And by divine providence, it happens in the month of Teves. Rambam passes away in the month of Teves because Rambam is a very dynamic messianic figure. I don't like to use the word messianic. It sounds like very whatever, but I'd rather use Moshiach figure. Rambam is a huge Mashiach force in the world, as we will talk, Be'ezrat Hashem. So Rambam and he belongs particularly in the month of Teves because he has to do with the rectification of the world, as we shall see, which is what the month of Teves is all about. Let's continue further. The next event that happens in the month of Teves is in the year 1812, which is the year 5,573, which is 213 years ago. And the day is the 24th of the month of Teves, which is the yahrzeit, the day of the passing of the founder of the Chabad dynasty, Rav Shneur Zalman Napoleon, who we spoke about earlier, whose founding fundamental teachings correspond with the foundation of the United States of America. And we'll see that he dealt not extensively, but he dealt to a certain degree with America, and he reveals tremendous secret about how America is going to be sublimated and elevated, and how that has to do with the final tikkun of the world, final rectification of the world. He is the one that gives his life to defeat Napoleon, as we discussed earlier, and he passes away on the 24th day of the month of Teves. So we're going to throw that into the mix. We're going to reveal what the connection is of the Alter Rebbe passing away in the month of Teves to the Rambam passing away 400 years before the Alter, 500 years before the Alter Rebbe, and Maimonides, connected to the 10th of Teves, the destruction of the first temple, which is the onset of the exile, which the deeper reason for the onset of the exile is, as we're going to discuss, a very Teves reason, which has to do with ending the summer period for the Jewish people and introducing the winter period of the Jewish people, which is the rectification that comes from exile, which is the discovery of godliness from the bottom up, not from up down, as we're still going to discuss. Finally, this will all lead us to the day that I mentioned earlier, the great victory that the Lubavitcher Rebbe had in court, which that happened on the 5th of Teves, and that happened, and again, and I would like to talk about the significance of that in this year more than any other time. Let's see. That happened in the year 1987, where in the 5th day of the month of Teves, which happens to be January 6th, which is a very interesting day on the American calendar over the last couple of years, which I think is very deeply connected as well to everything that's going on, is that it was on January 6th in 1987, which was the 5th day of the month of Teves, on that year that the Rebbe scored this enormous victory in which the federal government decided that the books are the Rebbe, and the Rebbe coined that day as Di Dan Natzach, the day that we won. And I don't think the Rebbe was only referring to about winning the court case with the books. That's not what won. The Rebbe spoke about the defeat of the forces of darkness on that day of Di Dan Natzach. Now, why is it so significant this year? And it has so much to do of Madura being captured right now. It has all to do with the fall of collapse of evil right now, and Messiah and Moshiach being in full throttle roll right now, is because 1987, we just passed the 39th anniversary. We entered into the 40th year. Now, 40 years is a very substantial, significant amount of time, because 40 is the time that it takes something to develop. A baby, according to Torah, is the main structure of the fetus in the mother's womb is 40 days. 40 days, I'm not going to go into it right now, we're going to speak about it later, is enormously significant. So 40 years ago is the milestone in the month of Teves, is the completion of, to a certain degree, Mashiach's victory over the forces of darkness that are trying to thwart the redemption. Based on that, I will share with you something in the last few minutes that we have. An announcement the Rebbe made, the Lubavitcher Rebbe made, stunningly, the Shabbos, the Saturday after, I think the victory of Hey Teves happened on Tuesday, if I'm not mistaken. This was the Shabbos afterwards. The Rebbe spoke. The Rebbe didn't even talk about the events that happened that week, although Lubavitch in the Shabbos talk, as far as I know. But what the Rebbe did, the Rebbe suddenly turns to the Hasidim, to whoever was there, and basically when the Rebbe speaks, he's speaking to the Jewish people, and not only to the Jewish people, he's speaking to the world. But over here, the Rebbe makes this announcement. He says, we should announce all the Pharisee and to publicize. That in these days, we just find ourselves bisman miyuchad, in a very specific time. There's nothing left over. There's only one thing left over to happen. And the Rebbe says, I'm going to mention it. I'm going to quote my father-in-law, because a person is obligated to speak with the words of his teacher. What is the only thing left to do? Everything has been completed. In other words, the Rebbe sees that Shabbat, Shabbos Pashas Vayigash, Tavshem Mem Zayin, 57, 1987. I don't remember. I don't know. It was if the January 6th. This probably was around January 10th or January 9th or something like that. The Rebbe turns to the world and the Rebbe says everything has been completed. Right now, the only thing that's left is that we should stand ready. Indu hachin kulchem. Everybody should stand ready for the building of the Holy Temple, the Bias David Malka Mashiach, and the coming of Mashiach. In other words, the Rebbe makes an announcement that something ended, something switches right now, and now we can all get dressed, stand ready to greet Mashiach, get ready for the third temple. And the Rebbe said this 39 years ago. Now, if you're superficial and empty and literally live on the surface, you look at these things and you say, oh, the Rebbe said this, and the Rebbe said this, and the Rebbe said this, and he probably wanted Mashiach so much, and he was, and he said a lot of other things. That's someone who's hollow and empty. I'm sorry for using very sharp terms. If you understand the Lubavitcher Rebbe, you understand that every word of his is purely downloaded from above. Everything is said with such incredible divine precision, because the Rebbe is a conduit for godliness in this world. When the Rebbe says a statement like that, it's because this is the message that's coming from above. Something cracked in 1987. We reached a certain milestone in the defeat of the unholiness and the world being ready for Mashiach. Well, it's 39 years later, yes. The completion of something is in a period of 40 years. That's why I'm enormously excited about the up and coming year, because the up and coming year is leading us into the 40th year. besides a gazillion other things that are coming together, particularly in this amazing time where we stand right now. So all of that is going to be discussed. Again, this is still part of the outline. I'm almost done with the complete outline of what we're going to unpack. I'm just just going to add one more thing. What is significant is what's happening in a month from now, a little less than a month already. Is the month of Shvat is going to be the 11th day or the 10th day of Shvat, and the 11th day of Shvat following that, which is the day the Rebbe became the Chabad Rebbe, in which he assumed the mantle of leadership. And when the Rebbe became the Rebbe, what's significant this year is that it's 75 years to the anniversary. That happened in 1951. So it's 75 years from 1951 to 2026 is 75 years. Now, why this number is so super significant is because the first Jew, Abraham, went out, was told to leave his father's house and go to the promised land when he was 75 years old. And what does it have to do with, okay, so Abraham, what is it? We know that there's a concept, an amazing Torah concept called that the beginning is wedged in the end. So there's a deep connection, correlation between the beginning of something and the end of something. So if the first Jew was liberated from exile, and it begins to become the channel for God into this world and goes to the promised land when he's 75 years old. And by the way, there's enormous Kabbalistic explanation of why it was 75 years old. I therefore am going to make the suggestion that the 75th anniversary of not the Rebbe private life, but him as the leader, the seventh Chabad leader, the one leading the world to the redemption, the fact that it's the 75th year of his leadership brings us into this cosmic redemption energy on the highest level. So there is so many correlations that are happening. Most important to all of this, I'm going to leave for tomorrow's class. We will complete the last and final idea of the sketch, and then we will go back and begin to really flesh all of this out and literally piece this all together. And I hope before I even give the class tomorrow, we don't have to talk about this, because the world we'll wake up in the morning. At least here in LA, it's still nighttime. By the time we wake up in the morning, we will see a different world, a godly world. We're definitely in the zone. So my main purpose over here is to share with you how in the zone we are and how incredible the time is right now, where we stand, and why all these things are happening right at this time. And things are going to come together as a puzzle that I believe you've never seen. It's just absolutely stunning. I've been following Moshiach prophecy and unfolding Moshiach over the last 10 years about, and what I am seeing right now is like beyond. So, and it's, by the way, it's all building on what we've seen over the last 10 years. It's nothing, it's not like something didn't happen. It's all coming together. It's just these pieces are coming together. And I will, however, say that I'm just seeing a tiny bit of it, because there's so much more, because our views as humans is tiny, but based on Torah knowledge and based on everything we learn, when certain things are just coming together in the ways that are so perfectly symmetrical, one with each other and fit together, it would be sinful, I believe, not to share. And that's where I'm coming from. So let's, Be'ezrat Hashem, continue this discussion tomorrow night.